your opportunity to listen and learn from the most successful people driving growth and success in Palm Beach County and beyond. Welcome to the Business in Paradise Palm Beach podcast with Cary Stamp, founder of Cary Stamp & Company, Principled Wealth Advisors. Cary and his guests share stories and insights from Palm Beach County's most successful executives, entrepreneurs, and community leaders. Learn how they made it to where they are today, what principles guide them, how they mentor others to achieve success, and more.
My name is Cary Stamp, and you're listening to the Business in Paradise podcast. I have a fantastic guest today. We have Tim Burke, who is a publisher and senior vice president of LRP Publications and the former publisher of the Palm Beach Post. Tim, welcome to Business in Paradise.
Cary, thank you for having me. It's great to spend some time with you.
We've known each other incidentally over the years, but I've never really had an opportunity to delve into your history, where you're from, what you're about, and how you got into the role that you eventually exited from a few years ago from the Palm Beach Post. So, Tim, tell me a little bit about your history. Where are you from, and how'd you get to Florida?
Sure. I know we had intended to cover some of this ground in a breakfast shortly before the pandemic. So I'm happy to resume or pick up that conversation. I was born and raised on the opposite side of the coast, a place that you are familiar with. I grew up born and raised in Los Angeles. So born in Glendale and lived my formative years through the middle of high school. I went to high school, my first high school in Pasadena, and then we moved. My family, my father worked for the Department of Labor for the U.S. government. We moved up to the San Francisco Bay Area, where I finished high school. So I'm a Californian at heart. I'm far, far away from home, but I've been in Florida for so long. This clearly is my second home. I love living here in a great place, and this is where my two daughters were born and raised as well.
And a little known fact about me, most people don't realize this. A lot of people know that I'm from Iowa, but they don't realize that I actually went to the University of Southern California. And I only spent 1 year out there. I went on a debate scholarship, and there was a little bit of a cultural clash coming from farm country in the Midwest to diving right into Los Angeles. And so I love LA and I love California, but I knew that it wasn't going to be a place where I wanted to spend the rest of my life. So I'm glad to be back here in Paradise too in South Florida. How did you get from California to Florida? What brought you down here?
It was through my career, my job as in newspapers. I did leave California. I graduated from high school, and since I was very, very young, about 8 years old, again, growing up in LA and reading the Los Angeles Times, and especially noted famed sports columnist Jim Murray, I kind of knew early on what I wanted to do. I loved sports and I loved English. I loved words. I loved writing. So I left home after high school and sight unseen, dropped myself in the middle of the country at the University of Missouri, which back then, there really were no high school advisors, so I knew what I wanted to do, and my uncle whispered in my ear somehow, some way he learned about the University of Missouri. So that was the best J school in the country. It's the world's first school of journalism. So I said that's good enough for me. Hopped on a plane. I'd never been on campus, and that's where I started and graduated from the University of Missouri. First newspaper job was at a Gannett, smaller paper in Springfield, Missouri. Again, starting out in sports journalism. Went to work in Dallas, newspaper in Dallas, Texas. Went from Dallas to work at the Miami Herald. And then went from the Miami Herald up the coast to the Palm Beach Post and with Cox Enterprises out of Atlanta. So that's how I ended up here.
At what point do you stop just being sports journalist? Were you still writing the sports when you're in Miami?
I was. I spent, I guess the first maybe 15 or so years in the sports universe, if you will, and it was just a a fantastic ride. No, absolutely no regrets. I had the opportunity to attend and cover and run some of the world's greatest sporting events you could imagine. Had the good fortune of hiring incredibly talented people, many of whom are obviously still working and plying their trade at the likes of the New York Times and the Washington Post. Just great people I had the opportunity to hire way back when we were all younger. And then at the Palm Beach Post, I did make the transition from sports over to the other side of the newsroom. Again, growing up in the newsroom on the journalistic side, and worked my way into management positions there. Ultimately, I was the executive editor of the Palm Beach Post, and then shortly after that, I became publisher of the entire operation. Somewhere along the line, in my route to publisher, I was tapped to literally start the digital transformation and operation of the Palm Beach Post. So I remember hiring our first digital employee, and we didn't have a website at the time. So I did a lot of different things after I left sports, and was so fortunate to have those opportunities. And then ultimately, I didn't go to business school. I don't have a business degree, so there was a lot of learning on the job, which I thought was just absolutely so rewarding and invigorating. And I had some great mentors and great bosses along the way.
In the Palm Beach Post, as far as the digital version, one of the first things that I do in the morning is I get up and I've got the Post app on my phone. There's actually two apps. One's to read the newspaper and the other one is to read the updates. I think it's called Post Now.
Right.
And so I would say until about a year and a half ago, I would periodically go on, I'd read an article, and they weren't charging me anything. And then it got to the point where it said, you've exceeded your number of articles for this year. You need to pay for a subscription. So I'm now happily paying for the digital subscription. Whoever put that strategy in place knew that the news-addicted people would be willing to pay, and they're getting my money.
Exactly. And it has been a fascinating journey in the digital space from, again, way back when. That started around 2000, and to see where it is now today versus back then, it's light years. But with that, Cary, and we can talk about it down the road on this podcast, perhaps, and when we talk about the business of journalism and the business of newspapers, with it has come a great opportunity to expand the reach and audience of a newspaper. But the business challenge and the business platform and the way you make your revenue in media, it changed completely, almost completely. So what worked in the past doesn't work today and in the future, and that has been the big challenge for those who run traditional media businesses.
I think a lot of people are finding that out right now, Tim, especially with what's going on with this pandemic and how it's changed all of us and how we work and interact with each other. But I want you to take me back for a second. So you're 20 years old. You're living in the lovely hamlet of Columbia, Missouri, and you're studying journalism. And you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to go out and conquer the world as a sports writer. Did where you ended up today, was that ever in the vision that you had however many years ago that was?
Never, which I think is a great story or background or lesson, which you can trust I share with my daughters, because you never know. And you always want to keep your options obviously open. You want to become, that cliche, you want to become a lifelong learner. Don't stop learning, and be flexible and adaptable, and et cetera, et cetera. So the short answer was no. I thought I wanted to be a sports editor. So I started out as a sports writer and a copy editor and did a lot of that great, it was fantastic training, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then I became a sports editor. And then I, with absolutely no regrets, working with great people, some of whom are still here at the Post, some who've retired, some who've moved on. But at some point, right, you start thinking, I had an inkling, I had an itch. I wanted to expand my horizons, if you will. And so I always say it's not for everybody, and there's not a right or a wrong. But in my particular instance, by expanding those horizons, it just opened up a whole new world, and allowed me to do some things that I didn't know that I could do. And of course, working with fantastic people who are the ones who actually determine how successful you're going to be. I just worked with so many great people in my newspaper life. It's just countless outstanding people.
And Tim, I want to follow up on that, because a few minutes ago, you mentioned that you had some really, really fantastic mentors along the way. And I think that's true for everybody that's become successful in any type of endeavor, that there have been some people that helped them along the way. Are there one or two that you can think of that really made an impact on who you've become and your journey? And how did you find those people, or did they find you? And what was that like working with them?
Yeah, gosh, I have quite a few, and I won't list them all, because I consider myself to be so fortunate. But there was a mentor early on, and I had just, again, I'm a young journalist working in the sports department in Dallas, the newspaper. That back then we had two newspapers in Dallas. It was really it was so invigorating and exciting when cities, people don't remember this, but a lot of cities had two newspapers. You certainly, with your background, you know what I'm talking about. But I was new to the newspaper in Dallas, was 20 something, and intimidated to some degree, not overly confident, certainly to a large degree, thought I could do it. But there was a managing editor, I believe at the time. He came in from San Francisco, so we shared the commonality of California. He came in from California. He was a Stanford guy. I grew up in LA. So speaking of USC, I was always a big USC guy. So we struck had nothing to do with work, but we struck a chord, and he took to me. And at that point, there was actually nothing structured. This was not a structured mentorship, but his name is Peter Badia. He is still in the business. He's now the executive editor of the Detroit Free Press. Just sent him a note the other day. It's not like we touch base every day anymore, but I just wanted him to know and reinforce how important he was in my early career. And he just took to making sure I was okay, making sure and his words gave me confidence. His attention gave me confidence that I could do this, that I could work at a big paper at a young age. So Peter was one early on. There was a couple of mentors, boy, so many of them, when I was working at the Palm Beach Post. I would mention one of my latest bosses by the name of Mike Joseph, and he was a tough boss in a good way. And kind of on the exterior, some found him to be intimidating, which I shared with him, and he just never could understand that. But again, in a positive way. But my first conversation with him, when I came under his wing, he told me, he said this, I remember this to this day. He said, "Tim, I'm going to help you. And here's how I'm going to help you. My number one commitment to you is your growth and your development. It's not about me. It's about you." And so and he committed to that. And so the lesson there was he was not only making me a better, obviously, executive as publisher, and helping me with business acumen. As I mentioned, I didn't go to business school. But I also, through that and through him, learned the importance of passing it on and sharing that, and making sure that my executive team around me, that I in turn gave them the same kind of attention around growth and development. And those are two. There are others that would take up another podcast, because it's so fortunate.
Tim, it's really beautiful when somebody shows gratitude for the people that have helped them along the way. I run family meetings with families that we work with, and a lot of times we get the parents together with their kids, and one of the first things that we talk about is the whole concept of gratitude and sharing the fact that people have helped us along the way and recognizing and reaching out. I have a practice that at least once a year, I'll reach out to somebody that along my journey has been instrumental or helpful, and just either call them or send them a thank you note or something. And sometimes I haven't talked to these people in 20 or 25 years.
Right.
But they get so much satisfaction, and I get so much satisfaction for recognizing the impact that they've had on my life. So I think that's fantastic.
It's amazing, Cary. It is amazing, the effect. And I think at the time, especially when you're younger, you're not fully cognizant of the impact and the effect. And I could I won't go into great detail, but there's another name. His name is Bob Neal, and at the time when I was under his wing, he was the president of Cox Radio, and he taught me all about marketing. And number one, he actually hired me into the job of publisher, which again was an unusual hire given my lack of I didn't have a business degree. So he took a chance on me. He showed confidence in me, and I learned so much from him about marketing and research and giving your customers what they need. Just so many great examples that, the current CEO of Cox Enterprises, that's a $20 billion super I guess they're on the fifth generation family business. Alex Taylor was another one of my bosses. He turned the editorship over to me and said, you can do it. I believe in you. And he was a forward thinker. So I learned from him, kind of reinforced the importance of looking ahead. Don't look behind, look ahead. And we need to adapt. We need to change. So these are just great lessons and great mentors.
Tim, so our listeners can decide whether or not they like you. Since you're in the sports business for a long time, will you just share with us who your teams are?
Well, I am still loyal. Again, growing up in Los Angeles, and Laker fan, I guess first and foremost. The Rams, because they left as a kid, I was a big Rams fan. Then they left and went to St. Louis, which is because of where I went to school and where my wife is from, and where I have a bunch of relatives actually in St. Louis. That's kind of my second or third home, however you want to call that. But so the Rams are not at the top anymore. But the Dodgers and the Lakers and the Trojans, not the Bruins. No way, not the Bruins.
No way.
It's an either or.
Yeah.
So it's US, the Dodgers and the Lakers.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. So, Tim, I want to go back now to you leave Miami, you come to the Palm Beach Post. Are you changing the publishing companies that you're working for at that time when you take the Post job?
Yes. At the time, again, we're going back many years. The Miami Herald was part of the Knight Ridder group, which no longer exists technically. It's now McClatchy, but and then went to work for the Post, which until a year before I left the Post, they were owned by Cox Enterprises out of Atlanta, the family business I mentioned, and just an amazing. There's a reason I stayed with the Post for so long. That was not my intention. I certainly, like others, had other opportunities to keep moving around, but the Cox was just an amazing company to work for, and so that's who owned us for just about my entire time at the Palm Beach Post.
So we have perspective. What year did you get there to the Post?
Well, I was there I left, I thought it was a good round number. So 25 years. I left last year. So 25 years, if the end of 93, beginning of 94. So if you say 94 through 2000, and I guess it was 19. Yeah.
Okay. So what were you doing when you started there?
At the Post, that was my first job running a sports department. So I was in Miami working in sports as a deputy sports editor, if you will. And then I was, again, my goal, going back to our previous comments and conversation, my goal was to become a sports department at a good sized market. And so this opportunity came about. I was hired, another great mentor. I was hired by Tom O'Hara up here to be sports editor. And that's where we started. And we were it was an amazing opportunity. The Post we were so super spoiled. Everything was growing at the time. The county was growing. The business of journalism was growing. Newspapers, everything was growing, and we had unbelievable resources. We had resources that most major city didn't have. So super fortunate, and that's where we started at the Palm Beach Post, running the sports department.
So you're running the sports department, and then what's the progression of your career with the Post that you end up being the publisher?
Well, the progression would be executive sports editor to assistant managing editor / digital, because that's when we started the digital operation. And that's where I started to learn about the importance of digital and technology in our business. Then I moved over to the news side. So I became the deputy managing editor. And then I moved upstairs to run digital for the entire newspaper as, I forget what the title was, VP for all things digital, for lack of better words. Then I became executive editor, and then I became publisher.
Okay. And so 25 years in one job. In 2019, you moved to LRP Publications to work for a guy that I've known for a very long time, or work with a guy that I've known for a very long time, Ken Kahn, and a great team that he's put together over, I don't know, the last 15 or 20 years since I've been watching Ken do what he does. Tell us what prompted that move and what you saw as the opportunity with LRP.
Well, I think what prompted that move was, again, I thought 25 years was a good round number. And we had been sold the previous year after working for Cox. The year after we were sold, there was the company that bought us was very good to me and to us. So no reflection there. But I had always wanted to do something outside of newspapers. So very fortunate and grateful that I had the chance to do a myriad of jobs within the newspaper business, which I've articulated. But I have always wanted to do something outside the newspaper business. I've like I said, a couple opportunities had come on before. I didn't. The timing wasn't right. So that part of it, I always wanted to do something outside the newspaper business when the time was right. So I thought the time was right, and I knew Ken through business circles. And but at the same time, I didn't know everything about LRP because I hadn't switched companies for quite a long time. So I enjoyed the prospect of a new challenge. I enjoyed, again, going back to the idea of learning something new and different. When you're in your 50s, I thought that was very intriguing to me. So even though LRP, it's LRP, I think technically Ken had changed the name of the company as we got more involved in digital. So LRP Media Group now. So there is some commonality there, but it's in the B2B world. And so I run our media products in the human resources vertical for us. That's the magazine, that's the website, it's newsletters, it's et cetera. And also LRP and Ken has built an events business around human resources. So
I've been to the HR Technology Conference in Las Vegas with Ken.
Yes. So you have seen that. So that falls under me too, as well as on the especially on the programming side. So I've learned just in shortly over a year, both live last year, and then now we're going virtual. I've learned so much in terms of that side of the business we're talking 10,000 plus attendees to the world's largest conference and expo for HR technology. So it is so it's been fascinating to learn something new, apply some of what I've learned in my other business and in my other jobs, apply that in this space. The media products, that is a little more like riding a bike, but the team is doing some great work and on that front as well. So, and how the media products and the conference and our events kind of commingle, if you will, and work together. We pay a lot of attention to that as well. So it's been exactly what I expected in terms of what I desired. Was a good time to make that make that pivot. Good time to apply some of what I've learned, both from the journalistic, the digital, and the business side into a new company and a new opportunity.
Tim, one of the things that I also find is a fairly common thing among really successful people is that for the most part, they go full throttle, whether it's in their work life or their personal life. And the big challenge is always the ability to balance your work life with your personal life. You mentioned 2 daughters. You mentioned Mrs. Burke. Tell us what life is like at the Burke home and what's going on. Where are your daughters now?
Sure, yeah, and I will be the first one to admit that the work-life balance I learned that was part of my learning curve as well. As you know, I mean, many of us are wired similarly in terms of go, and certainly if you're in the newspaper business, no matter what your job is, that is a 24/7 proposition. So I did try to do much better in that as I kind of learned and grew with my jobs and opportunities. So yeah, I have two daughters. One is again both born and raised in Florida. Brenna is my oldest, and she is a teacher here in Palm Beach County, most recently with Pinecrest in Boca Raton. And my other daughter, and my oldest is a Gator. So I mentioned that because until you move to Florida and understand it, you don't really know what that means. But for those listening, when I just say she's a Gator, everybody would understand what that means. Growing up in LA, it's a different kind of thing. Your affinity and your attachment to your teams, although intense, it's nothing like being a Gator. My other daughter, my younger daughter, she's now, I guess, I would say still recent, a couple years out of Columbia. She went away to New York to go to school. And she is now, actually, she's been in New York since working for a nonprofit in Harlem, while at the same time, she's a budding songwriter, composer, performer. So she's been living both of those worlds. And so most of her time she's been in New York since she went up there for school. She actually is now in St. Louis during the pandemic. She can still work remotely and do her music and visit some my wife's family. And my wife is from St. Louis. I met Karen when she actually did try out the journalism thing and decided she didn't want to work until 2 a.m. Every night as a young journalist. So but I did meet her when we were both working. I was working full time at my first newspaper job in Springfield, Missouri, and she was going to college in Springfield and was an intern at the newspaper. And then since moving forward, she worked for many years for Florida Power and Light.
Wow.
In marketing and communications.
In the parallels, I met my wife, whose name is Sharon, not Karen, but Sharon, working at the same firm downtown Chicago. Mm-hmm. So she was also in the financial services industry. And we met sometime in the mid 1990s, and she wanted absolutely nothing to do with me, and I wouldn't leave her alone. So right. It all seemed to work out.
I'm fortunate because my wife Karen, she understands and understood the journalistic demands, if you will. She was saying that she was a good sport is an understatement, especially early on when I mean there were just day upon day upon night where I mean that's just what you did and that's what it took. But but she understood enough that okay, I understand, I get that. Hopefully someday he won't work every night until 2 a.m. So she's.
And if I can follow that vein for just a second. So you're in the midst, I've only been in Palm Beach County for 16 years, but you've been in the midst of the biggest stories that have happened down here. And I call this podcast Business in Paradise because I truly chose to move here. We were leaving the Breakers Hotel one day in November, and I looked at my wife and I said, why are we going back to Chicago? And within a few years, we had a plan and we were able to come back down and live in what I call paradise. But as you think about all the major stories that happened in Palm Beach County on your watch over that 25-year period of time, What would you say were a couple of some of the coolest things or some of the most interesting or, whatever it is, the most traumatic things maybe that happened in journalism in that time?
It's a long list, I guess, fortunately, and in some cases, unfortunately, given the nature of events and news sometimes. But in my 25 years, what stands out probably, and again, just so, I'll cover the whole 25 in terms of identifying a few, and not all happened literally under my watch. I was publisher for the last 10, but I would say number one, I would go back to initially when I was running sports. Oh my gosh, covering, we covered everything. You name it, but the Dan Marino was for those who've been in this area, Dan Marino was it. That he's, still to this day, along with Don Shula, who just passed, the most popular and recognizable sports figures. So I remember Dan Marino's retirement. That was and Don Shula's retirement. Those were big deals in the sports world. On the news side, of course, probably starts with Bush v. Gore. Wow! I forget what I was doing then. I wasn't the editor then. That was before me, but I was obviously was at the paper. And our folks did an amazing job. But that was, you talk about a once in a lifetime experience of at that moment was a top 5 news event in our country's, I don't know, history, but certainly most recent history.
It was a contested presidential election that went to the Supreme Court. I don't know, how much bigger do you get than that?
Yeah, I'm always careful because I was careful of leaving something out, but yeah, no, it was no disagreement, and that it was I think it went on 37 days, I believe, and I remember our front pages, and then to our credit, and another great boss of mine, John Bartusek, was the editor at the time, and they made the right call. They didn't call it on that evening, and remember that's back when the print was still kind of the Bible. We had digital, but it was just the beginning of it. So what you said in that paper was at midnight, for example, then it goes to the press. That was going to be on the doorsteps, and you can't be wrong. Some newspapers were wrong. That was an unbelievable experience to be in that newsroom. So that certainly, I don't know, the hurricanes, 03 and 04, Francis and Jean and Wilma, and still vivid. Again, I really say this proudly, and again, not because of me, but our staff. I think we were at the forefront of covering and how to cover hurricanes. We set the table in the business, really. I believe that our staff did. They set the bar. This goes now a little further back, but we had an amazing investigative reporter, of which many of them are still there. It was always a kind of a linchpin of the Post. But we had a significant amount of corruption on the county commission, and the Palm Beach Post was the outlet that unearthed all the details, and several of them ended up, paying the price, if you will, as a result of what any good newspaper should do, and that's hold those in power accountable. So those, off the top of my head, those are those are unforgettable. Those are unforgettable.
I vividly remember moving down from Chicago, which people thought the politics in Chicago was a little bit corrupt, and arriving in Palm Beach County in 2006. And every other day, there was a story about a Palm Beach County commissioner that was either involved in a land deal or was doing something shady, getting paid off, or was going to jail. So that was great coverage. And if we didn't have investigative journalism, you probably would have a lot of things that people get away with that they shouldn't. So
there's no question. It's just it's always been that way. And the framers of the Constitution, they knew what they were doing, and that importance of a free press, regardless of your political bent. This is not a political issue. It's the importance of a free press in a democracy, independent free press. Those things do not come to light. They don't happen. And so we are fortunate in the state of Florida, where the so-called sunshine laws are liberal, if you will, in our state. So we do have access to information, public information, and that helps if you're an investigative reporter. It helps you find out things that others may not want you to find out.
Hey, Tim, a couple of other things I want to ask you, and then you've been a great guest today, and I'll let you go. But one of the things is that a lot of the successful people that I've talked to, they also have a habit of setting business and personal goals for themselves. Sometimes they do it annually, sometimes it's quarterly, sometimes it's as needed. Have you gone through this process in your life of creating goals for what you would like your life to look like and then trying to accomplish those goals?
I would say yes, but perhaps, well, I wouldn't say perhaps, but I do know that, or I would guess that my process might be more informal in some cases in some years than others. I absolutely definitely shoot for, I set goals, but I tend to set them more, they're more aspirational and more longer term. The shorter term, I tend to more like let the kind of actions and results lead to where I'm trying to get to in those more concrete stated aspirational goals. So if that makes sense, Cary, I mean, I wanted to become a sports editor. Okay, well, to do that, I mean, that was a clear goal of mine way back when, but to do that, I certainly had some goals in the interim, but I didn't put them all down on paper every year. I will, but I knew what I needed to do. And I assumed, or I hoped that, like I said, the results along the way would lead me to that longer term goal. Again, I did not have publisher initially on my goal to aspire, because it just wasn't on the roadmap at the time. Like I mentioned, I didn't go to business school. So, but it did, however, started dropping in my mind as I moved forward in my career at the newspaper. The other thing I would add to that is the importance of goal setting with your team, with your staff. That is that's one of the lessons that I learned along the way, and it's also something that in the newspaper business historically, way back when, we weren't really great at doing that. But as the business changed, and the necessity to make sure that those goals, those short-term goals, those, for example, quarterly goals, annual goals, those were written in stone as our business became more challenged, and our folks responded greatly. So professionally, that was a huge part of how we operated. Again, some companies that had been doing that for years and years and years, right? It was in their DNA. It wasn't necessarily in the DNA of that frantic world of newspapers until the business necessities kind of said, okay, we better lock it down a little bit more.
Yep. Tim, before we go, just so that our listeners know a little bit more about you, in addition to being a sports fanatic, are there some other hobbies that you like to indulge yourself in?
I do. Well, I mean, I think golf is one that's always at the top of the list. I got involved in the game way back when. My first job in newspapers, in sports, working in Springfield, Missouri, that was the place, the home of Payne Stewart. So I got to know Payne Stewart very well. I covered Payne. And so I suddenly became more involved in the game itself. So I started playing it religiously back then. So golf is a favorite, definitely is a favorite hobby. I will admit to, again, growing up in Los Angeles and having gone to the racetrack with my family and my grandfather, I grew up loving the horses. Now,
Santa Anita?
Santa Anita, right? My first high
Beautiful
school,
place.
right by there. Yeah, the great race place. But so I enjoy the horses, and it's not really it actually is not the gambling part of it. It just takes me back to my childhood, and there's something about it that just makes me peaceful and happy. So I enjoy that. I will tell you one other hobby that as a kid many of us had growing up was with collecting baseball cards. Well, the pandemic has been taking me into the closet, and out come the baseball cards. So I rekindled most recently, literally just in the last 2 weeks, the hobby or the passion. Again, it's more about taking me back and kindling what was a great exercise, and it wasn't about how much the cards are worth. Now, of course, I'm looking at my cards and going, how much is that one worth? But
Don Mattingly rookie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got all the 1980s Topps baseball cards in a box in my garage.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably 100,000 other 50-year-old guys, 50-something
Exactly.
guys running around with the 1980s Topps.
Yes.
When it
Yes.
was huge.
Yeah, that was the junk era where everybody Topps had competition, so all the cards supplied. Too many cards are out there, but that was a recent hobby I kind of rekindled. But I know we share a common friend in Joe Sterank, another really good friend in the golf business. So yeah, golf has been there for a long time for me. I thoroughly love enjoying playing, watching the sport of golf.
I will be having some great stories with Joe coming out on a podcast very soon, where he tells some absolutely fantastic stories about his phenomenal career in the golf business.
Yes.
Thank you for mentioning that. Last question. Tim, you've had a lot of people help you along the way. I've had a lot of people help me along the way. If you were a young person right now and you were thinking about getting into journalism, and you said, gee, someday I would like to run a publication, which may not be a print publication by the time they get to the point where they're running it, but I'd like to run a publication, or I'd like to be in journalism. What advice would you give to that person coming out of school right now to set their career in the right order?
Well, your timing is actually perfect. And literally, perhaps an hour before our conversation today, a friend of my daughter's who is a senior Columbia, I just talked to him for about an hour. He's asking me the same question, really, is what do I need to do? And, what is your advice? So what I told him was, business challenges aside, this is an exciting and opportunistic time for a young journalist, because a young journalist today comes ready-made with those digital and technical skills, which are a must. So that's something that I reinforced with him in terms of, you want to be a journalist, yes. You want to write good stories, yes. You want to be a great reporter, yes. But you got to be able to you got to be the whole package. You have to come with you in the most perfect of worlds. You can write code. You're a data geek. You know it all about data visualization. You can actually build from a technical standpoint supplemental material or content to go with the story that you just wrote and reported on. So that's paramount in terms of what somebody needs to have today. A broad experience is, I told him too, I said, the fact that you're not technically a journalism major, he's a creative writing and history major, I think. I said, good for you. You don't need to have a journalism degree. I said, but what kind of worker are you? What are those? You've heard that, again, a cliche about soft skills. When I hire people, right, I'm going to assume, let's just assume they have the smarts, but can they collaborate? Can they get along? Are they curious? Again, do they want to learn, continue to learn? Are they continuous learners? Again, given the rapid changes in all businesses, not just journalism, how adaptive are you? You must be adaptable. And that whole broad range of experience, it's just bring that to the table, because that's going to separate you from other journalists who think the way to make it is to just focus on, one thing or one topic and be an expert here. the way to go. So I think those are some key points and of advice that I literally just shared with this young man who I think will be he's going to be very successful because he's a lot of those traits that I mentioned are requirements, if you will, at a young age. He has.
Well, Tim, I can't thank you enough. I've heard you interview quite a few other people. So I hope that I lived up to some level of those standards as an interviewer.
You did, and then some.
Thank you. You've been a great guest today. Look forward to my listeners hearing the Tim Burke story on the Business in Paradise podcast. And I thank you again. This is Cary Stamp with the Business in Paradise podcast with my special guest today, Tim Burke of LRP Media Group. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Business in Paradise Palm Beach podcast with Cary Stamp, founder of Cary Stamp & Company, Principal Wealth Advisors. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of the Commonwealth Financial Network. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Cary Stamp & Company is located at 110 Bridge Road, Tequesta, Florida, 33469. Securities and advisory services offered through Commonwealth Financial Network member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor.